Listen, I don't hate the MoonSwatch, right? Swatch was a company that in the 80s decided to fight fire with fire during the quartz crisis. And they put quartz movements into cheap plastic watches that focused on fashion. And that single-handedly saved the Swiss watch industry. And so the MoonSwatch really lives in that vein. My problem is with the value. For almost $300, we really should have gotten a Hezolite crystal, maybe a Mecha Quartz movement with a sweeping chrono hand. And that's why I think if you want a real mechanical chronograph for the money, I suggest you look at the new 40mm Seagull 1963. Hey guys, I'm Max and this is Watch Crunch. WatchCrunch.com was built by watch nerds who got tired of the lack of real conversation on Instagram and the clumsiness of old school forums. So we built a modern platform for talking watches. So come check it out. Mechanical chronographs aren't simple things, and before the 70s, they were typically reserved for professionals who really needed to time things. People like race car drivers, pilots, and I imagine weather balloon operators. So in the 60s, when the Chinese Air Force needed a chronograph, the Tianjin watch factory just outright purchased the equipment from a Swiss movement maker, Venus. Now, Venus at the time was struggling to compete with Valjoux, Lemania, and they really needed to raise some money. So an unlikely partnership was born with the Chinese acquiring the equipment for manufacturing the well-regarded Venus caliber 175. They added a couple of extra jewels and the Seagull ST19 was born. You're probably familiar with the standard 38mm Seagull 1963. I had one years ago, and I presume it was the first mechanical chronograph for many of us. It was a charming little watch and I really enjoyed looking at it, but eventually I gave it away because the proportions just didn't quite work for me. The case was a little bit thick for a 38 and the lugs, they were just too long for such a small dial. The 18mm lug width didn't help and kind of made it feel dainty for a pilot's watch. Well, the watch now comes in 40mm and that seriously fixes almost all of my complaints. With the addition of a couple of mils to the width of the case, the Seagull no longer feels like a toy watch and it sits really nice on the wrist. Yes, a lug to lug of 50 might scare some people, but those lugs, they turn down aggressively, helping to contour to your wrist. I mean, I don't have a big wrist at 6.5 inches, but I can pull this off pretty easily. The step up to 20mm lugs also opens this up to a world of strap options. I've put mine on a Watch Gecko olive leather that I had kicking around, and I really like how the khaki stitching picks up on the tones of the dial, and the style of this strap I feel like looks period correct. But the biggest thing that surprised me with this Seagull out of the box was the dial. I don't remember my 38 having this level of finishing. It's a champagne color with 4 subdials laid out in the cardinal directions. Those subdials are done in a radial sunburst finish, and I went all in and got the moon phase because I feel like it creates a really nice balance with the dial elements. And I swear from a distance, you might mistake this watch for some high horology grand complication costing like 100 times more. But even up close, there's plenty of detail to appreciate on the dial. We get even hour indices applied in gold Arabic with odd ones represented by elongated triangles. The running second subdial is at 9, it has a stylized hand compared to the rest, and the 12 o'clock subdial indicates the date. It, as well as the moon phase found at the 6, are operated by recessed pushers built into the left side of the case. There's plenty of color on the dial with the hands done in blue, but it's not like overwhelming. But the shape of these hands I'm not crazy about. They're painted blue and red for the chrono hand, and I just wish there was a little bit more detail here, but instead they just kind of look like stamped out steel toothpicks. Now guys, if you like videos like this, you can help the channel out to continue to review these great watches by tapping that like button. And for those of you that have subscribed, thank you for your support. The MoonSwatch has a plastic case with a cheap battery-powered movement. The Seagull case is fully polished steel and contours with a gently domed sapphire crystal. So These two are almost incomparable on paper, except that they're both chronographs around the same price. You can get these Seagulls even cheaper on AliExpress, but I'm not ready to gamble that much, so I went through a website called Seagull1963.com. They're based in Belgium, and they claim to check every watch arriving from China before shipping, and sure enough, mine arrived in good shape. Now, the words column wheel heralds visions of high craftsmanship and in turn high value in the world of chronographs, and the use of a castle-shaped nut for the engagement mechanism supposedly imparts a mechanical crispness to the pusher. The placebo effect might tell me it feels more precise than like a Valjoux 7750, but honestly, I consider this just kind of bragging rights on paper. In any case, $300 and column wheel chronographs don't really belong in the same sentence. And it's also not bad to look at. Through a display case back, you peer into a little metropolis of polished levers, bronze gears, painted screws, red rubies. The 3 Hz movement is hand wound through a signed crown and does about 50 hours on a wind. The newer versions of this watch, like the one I have here, has a upgraded swan neck regulator for the balance, making tuning its accuracy a more precise undertaking, or so I'm told. I find the 40mm 1963 sporty enough to be dressed down, but with the moon phase, it can occasionally pretend to be a dress watch as well. The pebble-shaped case allows it to slip under cuffs with ease, and the new 40mm size is finally proportioned correctly. So let's give the Seagull 1963 moon phase a crunch score. On design, I would say the original 38mm watch was well regarded, and the new 40mm moon phase is another step up. The fit and finish is tight, and the whole thing feels well constructed. Now, I've heard of problems with the ST19 movement before, as part of the reason I suggest that you buy from a reliable source. The watch has a great heritage behind it, and you simply can't beat its value. So that's why the watch gets a full 40 out of 50 in my book. So this will conclude my 3-part series about watches you should actually buy over the MoonSwatch. Now, if you own a MoonSwatch, I still love you. I had one, it was really fun. But guys, let me know if you've owned a 1963 before. What's your experience with the ST19 movement? Share your thoughts with me on watchcrunch.com. I'll leave a link to a longer discussion in the pinned comments below. As always, stay crunchy. I'll see you in the next one.